Good evening, everyone, and welcome to GRIDnet, your weekly motorsports news program. I'm Adam Lemerise, and with me is Kobe Lambeth from the Podium Finish. A special shout out to our Patreon supporters, Colin, Deschelle, and Mark. Thank you for investing in Grid Network. Link to our Patreon in the video description below. And please feel free to comment in the chat room below and ask any questions. Tonight we'll discuss the worst kept secret in Formula in the F1 paddock is now official. Circuit of the Americas is planning an expansion. Matt White's grid history update, and two new manufacturers potentially entering F1 in the future. We'll start out discussing the really big news that came out of the state of Nevada late last night.
Yeah, it was late last night. Kind of odd. It's in a press conference 10:30 at night here in the East Coast, but it was 7:30 over there, local time in Nevada. And major news indeed. After tons of speculation and negotiations to make this come to life, a third race is coming to the United States in November 2023 to one of the biggest entertainment cities in the country. The Las Vegas Grand Prix is happening. It's officially a thing. Las Vegas, Nevada joins Austin, Texas, and Miami, Florida on the Formula One calendar. The major difference is Las Vegas. This race is going to take place on Saturday night under the lights on the Las Vegas Strip with the glamorous hotels and casinos in the background. The first Formula One race taking place on a Saturday since the year 1985. Formula One last race in Sin City 1981 and 1982 with the Caesars Palace Grand Prix, and all photos in this segment courtesy of Formula One. Adam, Formula One is officially coming to Las Vegas after tons of speculation for a primetime event on U.S. soil. How big do you anticipate this event will be?
Oh, this is going to be a huge event. You're going to have people coming from all over the world to see this event. And when this news broke, there was a lot of motorsports fans across the world wanting to know what would be on the undercard for the F1 Las Vegas Grand Prix. Well, Brock Feeney, who drives the number 88 Red Bull Ampel racing car in the Repco Supercar Championship, said he'd like to see supercars compete on the undercard with Formula One. And Chad Nalon, a supercars commentator, also said the same thing. We all know next year that that supercars is going to a Gen 3 car, which is going to feature the Chevrolet Camaro and the Ford Mustang, two American iconic brands. So could we see the Repco Supercars Championship come over here to the United States and compete with F1? They'll be teaming up next weekend at the Australian Grand Prix. So anything can happen. But this news is huge, not only for Formula One, but motorsports in general. And it's on a Saturday night. It'll start at 1 a.m. Eastern, 10 p.m. Las Vegas time, so they could say they have a race in prime time. So I know that's early for our friends in Europe, but we here in the United States, we'll watch Formula One race at 7 a.m., 8 a.m. So, I mean, hey, it's going to be good for the sport. I mean, and what a way to end the year in motorsports in general. Racing on the streets of Las Vegas. The glamour. It's going to be totally, totally awesome.
Yeah, I think that's one way to put the Las Vegas Grand Prix and the anticipation that it's going to be totally, totally awesome. You mentioned 1 a.m. Eastern time start time out in Las Vegas. It was going to be 10 p.m. Pacific time over there on the West Coast, and that's no different than next week's start time at 1 a.m. Eastern time for the Australian Grand Prix, and no different than the Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka. So this race is going to be starting at the exact same time as those others are going to be started, and that's something that the Formula One fans, especially those our friends over in Europe, as you mentioned, they're used to getting up for those events in Australia and Japan, so they'll just have an extra one to get up for with the Las Vegas Grand Prix. I think this is going to be really massive having Formula One come over here. That they have three different major markets covered. Down south in Austin, Texas, on the east coast of Miami, Florida, and now off to the west with Las Vegas. I think it's gonna. I think it just goes to show how much Formula One is growing right now in the United States. And I will get into that a little bit later. But I think that this event is going to be huge, and as I know they currently have a short term deal for a few years right now with the Las Vegas Grand Prix. But I think this has potential to be one of the must see events, must attend events that people all over the world will want to come to because Las Vegas has everything. And I know all the drivers are very excited about this event being added to the calendar. You saw Formula One release a video on their social media pages showing their drivers their initial reactions when it was announced that they would be racing in Las Vegas. Saw a lot of smiles and laughs because those drivers know they can get into a lot of trouble in Las Vegas, and it's going to be really hard for all of the Formula One drivers to focus because there's so many fun things to do in Las Vegas. So and Max Verstappen even joked that he's probably going to need like some time off from racing after that, since the season is going to end in December, so it sounds like Max is already thinking about some plans he may have when we get around to the Las Vegas Grand Prix in November 2023. And now looking at the track layout itself, the Las Vegas Grand Prix is going to be a 50 lap night race, 14 turn, 3.8-mile track with top speeds expected to reach all the way up to 212 miles per hour. The track is going to have three straightaways, high speed corners, and a single chicane. So, Adam, what are your initial thoughts on the Las Vegas Grand Prix track layout?
I love it. I mean, you take a look at it. I mean, you're going to have Formula One cars going down the strip at over 200 miles an hour. Uh, yeah. I mean, there's so many good places, to watch the F1 race in Las Vegas. You have the you have the high roller Ferris wheel. You have the stratosphere. I mean, you'll probably be able to watch the race from your hotel room. If you're staying on the strip. I mean, you know, it, we have a comment in the chat room saying that the Las Vegas track has 14 corners and 50 laps in total. Yes, and we thank you for that. I think it's a really cool track. I mean, I can't complain about it. It's gonna be an awesome race, and uh, going to Formula One cars down the Las Vegas Strip, it doesn't get to me. It doesn't get any better than that. No way.
Yeah, Formula One cars going down the Las Vegas Strip. It's definitely going to be quite a spectacle to see Formula One cars under the lights at Las Vegas. If you would have told me 5 years ago that this was going to happen, I would have honestly laughed at you because it seemed like something that was so far fetched and it would be really hard to make happen. But Formula One and local officials in Las Vegas, they've been talking, working with the negotiations and doing everything they can to make this track a possibility, and I'm really glad that they were able to come to a solution to make this happen. Yeah, I know looking at the layout, probably not the most exciting layout, challenging layout that you've seen in Formula One, but I think for the most part the big thrill is going to be those long straights, 212 miles per hour on the streets of Las Vegas. That's going to excite a lot of people, especially with Las Vegas lit up on a Saturday night in mid to late November. I think it's going to be quite a thrilling spectacle of an event, and as I just said, I think it's going to be a race that a lot of people will certainly want to go to in the future. But I know it's going to be a very pricey event. It is Las Vegas, for goodness sake. So if you plan to go to the Las Vegas Grand Prix next November, not this November, the following November, make sure you start saving up those piggy banks right now because it's going to take a big bite out of your bank account. And before we move on to the next topic, have another comment in the chat room from SHT saying this is the first time Formula One will return to Las Vegas since 1984, over 39 years since it's held next season. Thank you for sharing that. been a long time since Formula One been racing in Las Vegas, and I know in the early '80s when Formula One's first started off Las Vegas, couple of years, and then after that, kart ran on the streets of Las Vegas as well with this at Caesar's Palace. I know a lot of people didn't really like the track at all, so it was really like a parking lot track. So and it's going to be interesting how this one is going to compare to the old Caesar's Palace layout. And in addition to a third Formula One race in the United States, it really started off a debate on the internet among the fans if America truly deserves a third Formula One race. And some feel that more Formula One races in the U.S. gives American Formula One fans more opportunities to potentially attend the race, while others think Formula One could further diversify their schedule by visiting other places in the world seeking a Grand Prix, places like Africa. No surprise to see Formula One invest more into the American market because it has truly exploded here since the debut of the famous Netflix show. I'm sure some of you have probably already been watching Drive to Survive. Adam, does America deserve this level of investment by Formula One?
Yes. I'll let the viewers know if you so far the ratings for the for the first two races have it's been incredible. And you mentioned Kobe, the Drive to Survive. It's a really cool thing. And what we saw last year when Formula One visited the Circuit of the Americas in Austin, Texas, over close to 1 million fans came, and you know, you have Haas F1 doing really good right now in Formula One. So I think with everything like that, um, more Americans are tuning into Formula One, and it's incredible to see. Actually, for those of you who may not know, the W Series, which runs alongside Formula One, is actually going to have an American driver this year, Chloe Chambers, and actually they're going to have a double hitter in Miami, and I think they're going to have racing in Austin, Texas as well. So overall, Formula One viewership has skyrocketed, and we have a comment from SHT saying very interesting. I don't know what great moments I could expect from it. However, what I could say is that we could see a lot of wheel-to-wheel racing at the front and at the back on the long straight. Absolutely. There's going to be plenty of passing, you know, in the straightaways. So, like Kobe said, if you plan on attending next year, be here to save your money right now, because those tickets, hotels, and airfare, if you're coming from Europe, Australia, or even here to the United States, ain't going to be cheap. So save your pennies if you want to go see F1 on the streets of Las Vegas in November 2023.
Yeah, it's definitely not going to be cheap at all, Adam. When you look, we don't know what the ticket prices are going to be yet, but I imagine it's ballpark is Miami. But I'm thinking it might be a little bit more high. It might be a little bit higher than the prices to attend the Miami Grand Prix coming up in early May. But just outside of the Formula One ticket itself, you have to think about the other things. Like travel, how you're going to get there if you're in the U.S. Are you going to try to drive there, or are you're going to fly there? And it's going to be a lot more expensive if you're flying from overseas to come to Las Vegas. And also think about the higher food prices as well in Las Vegas than the hotel stay. Those prices are truly ridiculous in my opinion. So you're gonna need to make sure you have thousands, several $1,000s saved up for this trip because I think it's gonna be quite an expensive one, but a once in a lifetime event. So I definitely think it will also be worth it as well. And getting back to the question, if America deserves this type of investment from Formula One, if you look at the level of growth of Formula One viewership here in America, I think you can certainly justify that Formula One should invest more in America. And I know we talked about this on a previous episode of Grid Tonight months ago where I had a slightly different opinion. I felt like two races in Formula One was enough. We didn't need a third. But now, since I've had more time to think about it, I'm actually going to change my opinion a little bit and be like, a third Formula One race was certainly fine. I don't know about a fourth yet, but I'm sure if they feel the need to invest in a fourth Formula One race in America, a lot of people will probably be very excited about that. Understand a lot of people who watch Formula One from Europe don't really think America deserves a third Formula One race. And we definitely want to hear your thoughts as well. All the viewers watch right now, leave a comment down in the chat below. Do you think the United States is deserving of a third Formula One race or even more? And we talked about the Miami Grand Prix, which is going to be taking place on the grounds of Hard Rock Stadium, hosting its debut race on Sunday, May the 8th. Now we have Las Vegas in November 2023 in prime time. Miami and Las Vegas are two unique American cities, but they're not the only cities capable of putting on a Formula One race. If Formula One adds another street race in the United States down the road, where do you think it should be?
Oh gosh, there's several places. I mean, there's a lot of major cities, that would benefit. One that came to my mind, and I think Kobe would be happy about this, is have F1 to the streets of Charlotte, North Carolina. I mean, we all can dream. I mean, how cool would it be to see Formula One, come to the Tar Heel state? You could go to maybe Chicago, Illinois. Formula One used to have a street race in Dallas, Texas, back in the day. I know. I mean, if you want to stick to West Coast, how about Formula One to the streets of Los Angeles, California? We saw NASCAR have an exhibition race at the LA Coliseum, and everybody loved it. So, I mean, we all can dream about where we'd like to see one. To me, why not go with someplace like Los Angeles, California, or even Dallas, Texas? And as a wild card, Charlotte, North Carolina.
The Uptown Charlotte Grand Prix would definitely be a massive dream. As a lifelong North Carolinian, it would be amazing seeing Formula One in our own backyard. But as I said, talking about dreams is probably going to be more than a dream. I would actually bank on IndyCar having a street race in Uptown Charlotte before Formula One would even consider. I'm afraid Charlotte might not be able to handle Formula One event, but they did an excellent job hosting the NBA All Star Game a couple of years ago. I remember I was down in Charlotte at UNC Charlotte when that happened. The atmosphere in the city was just electric from that. A lot of students took the light rail down to Uptown, seeing all the NBA All Stars. A lot of people were excited, seeing like Giannis and LeBron walking down the streets. A lot of buzz, and if Formula One or any type of street race, any series wanted to come to Charlotte, there would be a lot of people super excited about that. But I'm afraid the Charlotte market is probably going to be a little bit too small for Formula One, realistically speaking. But if I had to pick a potential city to host a future Formula One street race, I have to think about the biggest city of them all in this country, New York City. Yeah, yeah, the Big Apple. Considering how massive that market is, I think if you put on a race in America's biggest city, it would be a slam dunk success. But not like but the type of track they should run on, it should not be like for the Formula E track in Brooklyn, New York. Yes, it's really nice to see the Manhattan skyline in the background when Formula E comes every year to race in New York. I know it would probably be close to impossible to get this done considering everything going on in the Big Apple. But it would really be nice if they were able to put a Formula One street race close to the heart of New York. It'd be really kind of like we're going to see Formula One cars going really fast down the Las Vegas Strip. How cool would it be to see Formula One cars going through Times Square? I think that would be such a beautiful sight to see. And let us know down in the chat below if Formula One could add another street race in the US, where do you want it to be?
And let us know in the chat room as well. If you could, what series would you like to see race along Formula One next year when they come to the streets of Las Vegas? Mission Supercars. Chase Briscoe saw the news and he'd like to see NASCAR race there. I mean, we all can dream about what series are going to run alongside Formula One, but we won't know that until next season. And now switching from four wheels to two wheels. Last week on Grid Tonight, we reported on Marc Marquez suffering from diplopia after his high-speed crash in Indonesia. While his condition is showing signs of improvement after visiting his doctor in Barcelona, Spain, he wasn't cleared to compete in this weekend's Argentinian Grand Prix. Dr. Sanchez Dalmau plans to be conservative with Marquez, who will undergo conservative therapeutic treatment. The week after Argentina, MotoGP heads to Circuit of the Americas in Austin, Texas for the Americas Grand Prix. And it's too soon to know if Marquez will compete here in the United States. And some other MotoGP news that broke earlier today, rider Tagada Nakagami from Japan has tested positive for COVID-19. So he will also miss this weekend Argentinian Grand Prix. And we wish both Marquez and Nakagami we wish both riders well as they hopefully can return soon. And speaking of COTA, here's Kobe with some news about. And speaking of COTA, here's Kobe with some news that produced an exciting finish in the NASCAR Cup Series last Sunday between Ross Chastain and AJ Allmendinger.
And before we jump right into COTA, I wanted to add a brief note of some MotoGP related news that happened tomorrow. The Friday practice session for the Grand Prix in Argentina has been canceled because MotoGP is having some freight delays in getting all of their equipment to the racetrack so they can race, and that's a really inconvenience there, and hopefully they'll get that figured out so they can continue on with the rest of the race weekend in Argentina. And I'm moving on. After a highly successful NASCAR race weekend at Circuit of the Americas, next year could get even bigger. COTA chairman Bobby Epstein told Austin American Statesman newspaper they're building a massive amusement park on site at the track that is scheduled to open in 2023. Over 30 rides, 2 mega coasters, and more to go along with the racing and concerts hosted at the sports and entertainment venue, not just the racetrack. Sports and entertainment venue as well. In the link to that article with all the information in the video description below. Denny Hamlin previously said NASCAR stands a better chance growing the sport if they take a Formula One style approach, turning a race weekend into an event that is able to maintain all the hype and excitement. In the photo you see here on the screen, taken by Logan Riley from Getty Images. So, Adam, is building a large amusement park a step in the right direction as Denny Hamlin's talking about? Just don't make it a race, turn it into an event, into a spectacle.
Sure. I mean, I think it's going to be cool. I mean, if you're a fan of amusement parks like I am, you'll be able to go to Circuit of the Americas and go, and take your family and go to an amusement park. I mean, there's lots of really great amusement parks all across the United States, and now we're going to add another one in Austin, Texas. I think it's really cool news, and I can't wait to see all the rides that they're going to put in along with those two mega coasters. It'll be fun for all ages.
Yeah, I think it'll definitely be a fun for all ages and definitely for the kiddies as well. And and thinking about adding an amusement park to the racetrack, I think that's a great idea because you can plan a weekend to go to the amusement park with a race happening, or you can go to the race with an amusement park. So vice versa. And I think it could be a great way to introduce more fans to the sport because some people might just go for the amusement park and then see all the cars there and decide to pay close attention. It's going to be interesting to see what this amusement park is going to look like once Coda build it. I know Coda currently has a lot of unused land still, and they plan to keep on adding to this land, and they can really turn it into one of the more remarkable sports and entertainment venues we have in this country, and really excited to see what they're going to be doing moving forward. And now some news coming out of IMSA. WeatherTech Racing is making some changes to its IMSA GTD Pro program, switching from the number 79 Porsche 911 GT3R for the full season. They're going to be going to the number 97 Mercedes AMG GT3 instead. Cooper McNeil is still going to run the full schedule in the Mercedes, with multiple Mercedes factory drivers joining him for the races and sponsorship support from Mercedes-Benz of Billings, Montana. The first Mercedes factory driver joining McNeil at the Grand Prix of Long Beach is going to be Raffaele Marcello. This means Porsche factory driver Julian Anlauer will focus on a new assignment elsewhere in the world given to him by Porsche. Next, here's Matt White with a grid history update.
Hi everybody, Matt White here. Time for this week's weekly results roundup from the Grid Network team. On a busy weekend it was as well. Not so much going on realistically compared to last week, but still plenty to get our teeth into. So let's get cracking. We'll start. We're at Jeddah in Saudi Arabia. I know we've covered it a lot over the last few days here on the network, but let's go through the results. F1 and F2 in action even. Max Verstappen getting the victory in the Grand Prix. Terrific fight with Charles Leclerc all the way down to the flag to get his first win of the season. In F2 they were the support act. Liam Lawson getting the victory on Saturday after Dennis Hauger's trip through the pit lane when he shouldn't have come in while in the lead behind the safety car. Silly mistake, rookie error really from the F3 champion to rule himself out of victory. Felipe Drugovich won the feature race on Sunday morning. At COTA we had NASCAR all three series in action. Zane Smith getting the victory on Saturday in the Truck Series. AJ Allmendinger getting the win in Xfinity. And it looked like he was on for the double before Ross Chastain stole it away at the end of the Cup race for Trackhouse's first win as a team. Terrific fillip for them, only a few races into their career as a Cup team. The Nürburgring Endurance Series kicked off at the weekend, the NLS, and it was a win for Porsche with the Grello 911 car for Manthey, Lawrence Vanfor, Fred McAvicky and Michael Christensen getting the victory in the first round of the season. The second round of the European Rally Championship was on the Portuguese island of Azores, and Efren Lorena got the victory there, driving a Skoda Fabia. Down under, we had supercars in action. Shane van Gisbergen sweeping the weekend with 3 victories. Same was true for Tom Heyman in Aussie Racing Cars. He took 3 of the 4 race wins. Josh Anderson getting the other one. So Heyman clearly in the lead of that championship. And the V8 Utes Championship started as well down at Simmons Plains. Craig Dontas getting 2 victories and Craig Woods the other. Unfortunately, they lost the 4th race due to an accident and time certainty. And a quick shout to Samantha Tan, who we feature regularly on our Women in Motorsport show. She was the winner of the Mugello 12 hour. You would have seen Daniele was there last week for that race, and she won that race along with Bryson Morris and Nick Whitmer. So good stuff there, and we'll be bringing you more about that, I'm sure, this week on the show later on in the week with Daniele. Just a quick reminder that Grid History rolls on every single day. We post a tweet on grid_history with a race that happened on this day and hopefully a link to it. We've had some different bits and pieces going on this week, but lots of stuff to get your teeth into if you haven't caught up on all of those races I've just mentioned from the weekend. Back next week to give you a breakdown of what's happening this week. We've got Argentina for MotoGP, Richmond for NASCAR, so plenty of bits and pieces going on. And then we build up to the big, very busy weekend just before Easter with Formula E coming back in Rome, and it's the Long Beach Grand Prix in 2 weeks, as well as Melbourne for F1. So plenty of stuff coming your way, and we'll feature it all here on the Grid Network.
Thank you, Matt. And according to Reuters, Volkswagen is having a big meeting next week and expected to give the green light for Audi and Porsche to potentially enter Formula One in several years' time. Last year, it was reported that Audi was looking to buy out McLaren, but those claims were strongly denied by both sides. And when I say strongly, that is actually an understatement. Now, Reuters says that Audi is planning to offer McLaren a whopping $556.3 million to buy McLaren in order to join the F1 grid, as Porsche is planning to start a partnership with Oracle, Red Bull Racing, and a link to this article in the video description below. If Audi and Porsche join Formula One in a few years, how would it shake up things across the entire motorsports world?
Well, Kobe, we all know Audi and Porsche have been really successful in sports car racing. We think back to IMSA in the 24 Hours of Le Mans, how Audi they dominated that race. Back in the day with their diesel cars. You had names like Alec McNish, Tom Christensen, Frank, among other drivers, winning. So having Audi and Porsche in Formula One, I think it'd be kind of cool. I mean, what we've seen so far, we talked about Andretti Global potentially being in Formula One in 2024. So Audi and Porsche in Formula One, I think it'd be kind of cool. I mean, two iconic manufacturers in sports car racing going over to compete in F1, I think it'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, I think it would be kind of cool as well. As as I say, the more the merrier. And I think if Audi comes to Formula One and buys out McLaren, it'll be interesting to see what happens to the current McLaren Formula One team, especially McLaren CEO Zach Brown. I know Audi has his own boss in place, and then Porsche, Red Bull. That would be a really interesting tie-up, especially when you think about their new LMDH car that they have coming out with Team Penske and Porsche handling the factory program. They're going to run in the hypercar class in the World Endurance Championship next year, and also the GTP class in the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship. And the World Endurance Championship actually announced this year they're going to allow any LMDH car that wants to run and get some testing mileage and racing conditions. They'll be allowed to enter the final WC races of the 2022 season after the 24 Hours of Le Mans as an unclassified entry. So I think I think it's going to be interesting to follow that story and see if Team Penske is going to enter a Porsche LMDH in one of the WC races by the end of this year. And that's something I'd also like to see IMSA do as well, to allow them to run as an unclassified entry so the fans can get an early taste to see what an LMDH prototype is going to look like. I know IMSA did that in the mid 2010s when Chip Ganassi Racing ran the Ford GT program. They allowed the Ford GT to run as an unclassified entry at Petit Le Mans. So I think they could certainly do the same with that. But getting back to Audi and Porsche, think it could be a great thing for the sport, especially Porsche and a potential Red Bull tie-up. I don't know what the future is going to be like for the other Red Bull drivers besides Max Verstappen. And if the scheduling works out and if Red Bull and Porsche is going to eventually have a partnership, how cool would it be to see Max Verstappen get in a Red Bull sponsored Porsche to go run the 24 Hours of Le Mans, the 24 Hours of Daytona, and those big crown jewel events? I'm sure that would certainly be a task that Max Verstappen would really be excited about if all the stars align. And before we move on to the next section, Adam, we have a question here in the chat room. I'm gonna let you answer it first, and then I'll go from SHC saying, just curious about all of your opinions. Do you think Marquez should retire with all of the injury he sustained in these last 3 years?
Wow. Marc Marquez is a racer, and, we all know, he's been through a lot. We all know, I think it could happen. I just don't know when. Marc Marquez loves to compete. And he loves to ride those MotoGP bikes. So, I think now, after everything that's happened, especially with that high-speed incident at Indonesia, I think Marc Marquez now needs to take better care of himself. Otherwise, he may be forced to retire, due to all injuries. So I don't think Marc Marquez should retire, but he needs to take better care of himself. Otherwise, we could see what happened in Indonesia sometime again this year in MotoGP. What do you think, Kobe? Should Marc Marquez retire?
Well, Adam, I think that's a question for Marquez himself. I'm not gonna tell somebody what they should or shouldn't do. That's ultimately a decision that Marquez has to make for himself. But I agree with what you said about taking better care of himself. I wonder when yeah, you remember Marquez had the injury to his arm, had surgery, and then came back just a few days later and ended up making things worse and had to miss even more time, and I felt like that was a really bad decision by Marquez. I'm sure he wishes that he would, if he had another opportunity to do that again, then maybe he might make a different decision. And I know he's still a young guy, just about to turn 30. So and you know how younger people are, Adam. You think you're invincible. You think you're making the right decision, that I'm gonna tough it out and all of that. But sometimes it's not really the best decision. Sometimes you have to really just slow down and see the bigger picture. And looking at Marquez now, yeah, he's still very competitive, but as of right now, he's not the same Marquez we knew several years ago. Going out and dominating just about every single MotoGP race on the calendar. Is good to see. He still has the fire inside him, that he's still competitive whenever he shows up to the racetrack. Not the same Mark that we knew from before, but I'm afraid, as you mentioned, SHT, with all of the injury he sustained in the last 3 years, if those injuries keep piling up, he might be essentially forced to retire, just like Dale Earnhardt Jr. had to do in NASCAR with all of the concussions suffered. Dale Earnhardt Jr. could have competed in NASCAR for at least a couple more years, and he said he came back his final season on NASCAR just for his fans, so just for a farewell tour, so his fans could see him race one final time. So if it wasn't for that, I don't think Dale Jr. would have returned to the seat of the race car, and I feel like Marquez still has a lot of great years of MotoGP left in him if he can take good care of himself, as Adam mentioned. But if these injuries keep piling up over the next few years, I have a feeling Marquez may not have no choice but to retire from MotoGP.
I completely agree with what you said, Kobe. And hopefully Marc Marquez, will be healthy enough to ride in the America's Grand Prix at Circuit of the Americas in Austin, Texas. I'm assuming Marc Marquez has a lot of fans here in the United States, and you know, they want to see him compete. Unfortunately, he can't right now due to injury. So, we all wish Marc Marquez a speedy recovery, and hopefully he can compete in Austin, Texas, in a couple weeks' time. And now switching over to some NASCAR news. As we correctly predicted on our last episode of Grid Live Wrap Up, Bubba Wallace's 2311 racing team was handed a major penalty. Wallace's number 23 Toyota lost the wheel during last Sunday's NASCAR Cup race at Circuit of the Americas, and that's a big no-no in NASCAR standards. As a result, Bubba's crew chief, Booty Barker, Jack Van Caleb, Drix, and in rear tire changer, Adam Raleigh were handed a 4-race penalty. 2311 Performance Racing Manager Dave Rogers will be Bubba Wallace's interim crew chief during Booty Barker's 4-race suspension. And as a side note, a young protege of Bubba Wallace's is making his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut this Saturday at Richmond Raceway in Virginia. 19-year-old Roger Carruth will drive the number 44 Chevrolet for Alpha Prime Racing, with sponsor from an HBCU school, Virginia State University. Kurth is attending another HBCU school as well, Winston-Salem State University. He'll compete in select Xfinity rides this year with Alpha Prime Racing. He also has a full-time ride in the Marco Menard series with Rev Racing. Link in the video description below if you want to check out our past Life on the Grid episode with Raja, and tune in Sunday on Grid Live Wrap Up for our driver spotlight segment to see how he performs in his Xfinity Series debut. And also, I'll throw it back to Kobe for our wrap up on another edition of Grid Tonight.
Yeah, another edition of Grid Tonight in the books. And please be sure to like and subscribe to Grid Network here on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. We encourage you to take 5 minutes after our show and consider joining our Patreon and invest in Grid Network to keep us on the air well into the future. Do you want to buy me a coffee? Click the link in the video description below, and you can buy a drink for your favorite on-air talent here at Grid Network. And a big thank you to Edward Hunter from Formula E Zone, Amber, and Zachary as well for buying us one. We greatly appreciate it. Any amount will help us continue growing our motorsports media outlet. Visit Public.com, also known as the stock market social media home. The link below and referral code gives you $5 to invest. Public.com allows you to connect with your friends. You can make new friends and use tools to learn how to properly invest in the stock market. And earlier today, Women in Motorsports aired a brand new episode. Be sure to check that out with Joe Samniego and Daniel Zuri from Racers, Girls Behind the Helmet. And then Saturday at noon Eastern, we're going to be back on the air for Grid Live pre-race, and Sunday, Grid Live wrap-up to recap all of the racing happening this upcoming weekend, 90 minutes after the NASCAR Cup Series race at Richmond Raceway. For Adam Lemerise, I'm Kobe Lambeth from the Podium Finish. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
Don't be an anonymous investor. Join the stock market social media platform, Public.com. Invest any amount of money and share with friends and new friends. Discover new opportunities, such as new companies and potential business partners, and useful tools for beginners, and share your experience with friends on Public.com. Link in the video description gets you $5 for being a Grid Network viewer. Use the referral code GRIDnet for your free $5 to invest and start investing and networking on Public.com.